My name's Ian Townson. I began the queer tour of Brixton probably about 4 years ago. Originally it was only intended to be a one-off tour, but people kept asking me to do it again and again. So I think now I've probably done the tour about half a dozen times, maybe a bit more. What it involves is talking mostly about the LGBT group, although we didn't use the alphabet then, just lesbian and gay group, in and around Railton Road in Brixton during the 1970s, shading into the early 80s. What we did then in terms of squatting the first ever gay community centre at 78 Railton Road, and the subsequent development of about 10 shared houses, squatted houses, all gay, mostly overwhelmingly gay men. One or two lesbians stayed for a time, and they're back-to-back on Railton and Mail roads, with a shared garden in between. Originally the gardens were all split into individual plots, so we knocked down all the brick walls and said this is now a garden for everyone, a shared garden. And I think from there we tried to live an alternative lifestyle from the one that we were expected to live, which meant instead of living in isolation in our bedsits or flats or whatever, we decided to bring gay men together and live communally as an experiment and also as a challenge to the status quo. And some people just came with us because they needed somewhere to live, or they were isolated and they preferred to be with other gay people, and that was about it. So what I do is I've done two things. I have the queer tour of Brixton, but I've also created revoltinggays.com, which is the website which covers roughly 10 years from the early 70s to the early 80s and takes in the history of the gay community around that time. But also it talks about all the other groups in and around Railton Road as well. And I think since then I've been invited to several places, about 6, 7, 8 places to talk about it and to run slideshows about it and so on and so forth. And having said all that, here is the talk, and enjoy. Welcome everyone, very pleased to see everyone here. My name's Ian, I'm your tour guide for the day. In fact, I'm the only tour guide for this walk, as far as I know. What I'll do is I'll briefly outline what the walk is going to be about. Then I'll do another little brief outline of the 1970s, because this will be mostly about the 1970s. The focus will be on Railton Road, because that's where the South London Gay Community Centre was based, and the subsequent development of the gay squatted community in and around Railton Road. I'll shade it from the 70s into the early 80s, because 1981 is a crucial year. That was the year of Brixton uprisings, and Railton Road was the epicentre of the rioting, and the gay community actually supported the uprising on the street, but we also produced a statement which was read out in Parliament by an irate Tory MP for Streatham, William Shelton, I believe he was called, and he didn't like these groups that supported these criminal types who were rioting. Of course, they weren't criminal types. There were people rioting against racist police harassment, and Swamp 81 really sparked the whole thing off. But the whole rioting and the uprising was years in the making. It was because of years and years and years of racist harassment by the police and by the local publicans who wouldn't allow black people to drink in their establishments. So that's a bit of a background. I think in terms of the 70s, the 1970s compared to now was saturated in political activity right the way across the board. Not just in the gay liberation movement and the black liberation and women's liberation movement. The labour movement was very, very strong, so were the trade unions. And as early as 1971, there were strikes, demonstrations against the Industrial Relations Act, which was introduced by Edward Heath, the Tory government. And there were two miners' strikes, one in 72, 74. The 1974 miners' strike brought down the Tory government. They were thrown out, and that ushered in Harold Wilson's second term. There were school student strikes in 1972, against corporal punishment and boring teachers, whatever, a whole raft of things. More recently, the school student strikes have been against climate change, so there's still a momentum going there. There were still lively demonstrations against the Vietnam War, which didn't finish until the Americans were expelled in 1975. The Troops Out of Ireland movement was very lively because they wanted to get rid of the military occupation of the north of Ireland by the British troops and freedom for Irish political prisoners, among other things. There's the anti-apartheid movement against the racist regime in South Africa. There was the Anti-Nazi League, Rock Against Racism. There's a lot of fascist activity in the 70s, especially the National Front, who we demonstrated against. And in 1977, they got their comeuppance in Lewisham, where we absolutely smashed their demonstration to pieces. Good riddance, I think. We supported workers' strikes. The Grunwick strike, which is mostly Asian women workers who went on strike just for the right to belong to a trade union. And that was well attended. There were lots of people from the gay community went on those pickets at the, I forgot where it was, a film processing factory in North London, Grunwicks. We also supported the Tricol women who went on strike for equal pay. And that's a brief outline. But besides that, let's not forget the 70s was the decade that the women's liberation movement really came into its own. It had its genesis in the late 60s, but it really gained much more traction in the 70s, as did the gay liberation movement and the black liberation movement. The thing about the students' movement was they were striking against for better education, but also they did alert the labour movement to issues they don't usually take up, like anti-racism and anti-sexism, because they didn't really come out of the labour movement. They had to be pushed into that by people who had independent way beyond just economistic ways of thinking. The squatters movement was huge. There were 30,000 people squatting in London in the 70s because of local governments and private owners just left buildings empty until they fell into semi-dereliction. Nobody was using them. There was a huge housing problem. There's over 20,000 people on the housing waiting list in Lambeth. So people squatted, and they squatted to house themselves, but it also provided places for alternative facilities like cafes, places where you could have gigs, musical entertainment, alternative news service, all kinds of things. There was the anti-psychiatry movement who were against conventional ways of treating mental health, which usually meant filling people with drugs. So you had people like R.D. Laing and Arthur Janoff and all these radical psychiatrists. The movement sprang up around them to challenge the conventions around psychiatry. Oh yeah, of course, there were also counterculture, a counterculture which some people unkindly call drippy hippies, which I think is a bit unfair, because the counterculture actually did provide a lot of breathing space for people who were incredibly creative. They had lots of creative talent came out of that. They tried to challenge the nuclear family and conventional ways of living to try and produce something new. This is not going to be an ordinary English heritage tour. So, without further ado, our first spot. Not a million miles away, it's over the road, the Commercial Hotel. The reason why I'm pointing that out is it's one of several public houses that we were thrown out of because we came out as gay, publicly as gay. Coming out publicly as gay meant either we had lots of badges saying how gay we were, like Gays Against Fascism, Avenge Oscar Wilde, Lesbian Avengers, whatever, all kinds of bit. Or we'd hold hands, or we'd give a kiss when we were greeting each other. Different ways of coming out. 3 reasons why we come out. 1 is just good for individuals to come out, so you're not in the shadows pretending not to be gay. 2, it was 2 fingers up at the authorities, because we were still illegal at the time. We could have been arrested for importuning for an immoral purpose or gross indecency. The police could have dreamt up anything, but nevertheless we came out anyway and said, screw them, we will come out despite all of that. And the third reason, I think, it was good for people who were less able to come out or less willing to come out to see that there's a group of people out there fighting our cause and willing to put themselves out there to do that. So that's really our first port of call. We were thrown out of it for obviously coming out publicly as gay. We didn't do much about this apart from moaning and groaning about it, but there are several other places we were also thrown out of. We'll come to those later, and there we did do something about it. So without further ado, we'll go on to our next spot. As you can see, this mural is fairly new, probably just over a year old or thereabouts. This was painted to commemorate the 1981 Brixton uprising. What it depicts is all the different groups and individuals in and around Railton Road who are active from the 70s, probably up to about the year 2000. And as you can see, a lot of it was about the harassment, racist harassment of black people by the police, but also by publicans who wouldn't allow black people to drink in their establishments and so on, and just generally racist harassment from every single corner. You can see one or two things I think we can probably point out one or two things. There's the Women's Centre. There are actually 3 women's centres on Railton Road. Somewhere in here, I think it's Pearl. Pearl is a bisexual black woman who ran a shebeen for black gay men. I mean, gay friends were welcome, white gay friends were welcome as well, but it was a good thing to do because black gay men were not tolerated very well in the black community. That was one reason. And also, generally speaking, they were barred from a lot of white establishments. So it was a great thing to do. Shebeens, does everybody understand what a shebeen is? An illicit drinking establishment, sort of. And there we have the naked people. I think this when the 121 Centre was evicted. That was a really great place. That was at 121 Railton Road. They had all kinds of things there. Were music gigs, all kinds of workshops went on there, and campaigns were organised from there. So stop gentrification. A lot of Brixton is being knocked down and gentrified, so there's lots of protests against that. I like that one. Fund youth services, not more prisons. That's one of my favourites. Of course, the 198 Centre, this is the end gable of the 198 Centre, which is here. That's really, they actually put on an exhibition of Pearl's artwork because besides running illicit drinking establishments, she was a very accomplished artist. In fact, she had an exhibition at the Tate Britain as well, so she was quite well in there. We can go to the next stop. Okay. This is another pub that we were thrown out of. Now this time, instead of moaning and groaning, we actually did something about it and we occupied it and said we have a right to drink wherever we want or whatever. And some Labour councillors came and joined us. So when the police arrived and threw us out onto the pavements, they dragged the Labour councillors out as well. And they, which was unusual because at the time, most Labour councillors were hostile to the gay centre. They didn't want it, and they didn't want. They thought it was some kind of private club or something. I don't know. There's a lot of homophobia as well around that. I think there's only probably about a couple of left-wing Labour councillors that supported it, including Ken Livingstone, who was Labour councillor at the time. But again, I mean, the thing is, there's no protection. I mean, once you're thrown out, you can't appeal against that. So we had to be defeated. And when we come to the George Public House, another one that we were thrown out of, I'll tell you a bit more about that because the publicans were actually prosecuted under the Race Relations Act. But we'll come to that later. Now, St Jude's Hall. This is where we had a theatre group, Brixton Faeries. This is where we put on I'm not sure what it was, a Christmas cabaret cum pantomime for pensioners and girl guides. And it was very successful. They really liked it. It was a real wow. Mind you, we did copy Blue Lips' version of Oscar Wilde's salacious play Salome, which includes the chopping off the head of John the Baptist. Now, whether the head of John the Baptist rolling around on a floor in front of pensioners and girl guides was the right thing to do, I don't think it probably was. But even so, it went down well. It was brilliant. We got applauded and hooted and whatever. So that was really us saying, we're part of the community and we can go and do that and whatever. And I think that's probably, and besides that, we did one or two cabarets and sketches and whatever. So we did quite a lot of creative activity around theatre, Brixton Faeries. I'll just give you a mention of the other plays that we did. One of the first ones we did was Mr. Punch's Nuclear Family. And it was based on traditional Punch and Judy. Oh, you saw the On Railton Road, didn't you? The remake of that. They included that. That was, attacking, patriarchal system and male chauvinism and anti-gay homophobia and sexism and so on. So it's quite a political play, but it's done in a funny way using, Punch and Judy is the best possible vehicle because Punch is usually always battering his wife to death on the, that's the way to do it, So we use that as an attack on patriarchy and whatever. Out of it was a play against psychiatric cures for gay people and against fascism. Where else did we have? Oh, against the Festival of Light, all the Christian moral crusaders against perversion and all that kind of thing. That was out of it. Gents was something very specific. Gents was about cottaging, about men having sex with men in public toilets. We sort of did a thing about that, partly celebrating it, but warning about the dangers of it, getting arrested by the police, getting beaten up by queer bashers, and so on and so forth. But there is a campaign now, in fact I think they're successful, that's to get 15,000 gay men who were prosecuted for cottaging or whatever, to have them not pardoned, just pardoned, but have their police records wiped altogether. It's rumoured, I don't know if it's true or not, that they have to apply for that. Well, it's a bit difficult if somebody's died. How are they going to apply to have their police record wiped? So it should be not that bureaucratic impediment, it should be an automatic thing that happens without having to apply for that. And Terry Stewart was quite instrumental in that campaign to get those 15,000 men exonerated. Minehead Revisited, otherwise known The Warts That Dared to Speak Their Name. This was about Jeremy Thorpe. Jeremy Thorpe was the leader of the Labour Party at the time. Sorry, it wasn't. Liberal Party. Strike the Labour bit. Sorry. Sorry. Liberal Party, yes. And he was brought up on a charge of conspiracy to murder Norman Scott, with whom he had an affair, a sexual affair. Nothing much to see there. It's now just the corner house there. It's now private dwellings, but in the 70s it was the one of the 3 women's centres. But it also doubled for a claimants' union for people who were fighting against abuses of any problems that came up with welfare benefits. But it was also the squatters' centre as well. One of the squatters' movements met there, and a Men Against Sexism group, and also you could go there and have a bath, because some of these squats didn't have much, they had dodgy plumbing, so they allowed people to go there for a bath whenever they wanted one. So I think Carol Paris and a couple of other women were involved in that. I think the gay men who went to the Men Against Sexism, they fell out with the straight men because they felt as though they were being patronised by them. So they said, oh, we're not staying here. we're not staying here to be patronised by these bloody people. So there's a bit of a thing about that. And they didn't really feel that straight men were taking their sexism seriously enough. So there's a little fallout there. They organised squats. They opened up, if people wanted a place to live, they would help them to open up the squats and find ways of fixing up the plumbing and so on and so forth. I think that's all I can say. I think that will do for now. And we move on to our next spot. Well, as you can see, across the road are a number of portraits. Darcus Howe, Linton Kwesi Johnson, Farouk Dondi and Olive Morris. All of them were members of the Black Panthers, the revolutionary group, in the 70s, and they're all members of the Race Today collective. Darcus Howe was responsible for defending the Mangrove 9 in West London. This is when the police habitually raided the Mangrove restaurant just for a bit of racist harassment. They used drugs as an excuse to go and raid the place. And I think 9 people got arrested, and I think Darcus defended himself and them and quite successfully and got them off. But I think one thing that he was really involved in of crucial importance was around the New Cross fire in 1981, where I think 13 young black people were burnt to death at a party which was arson. The police dragged their heels on it. They were negligent. They didn't care. They blamed people themselves there for starting the fire, and they're pretty sure it was an act of arson and it was murder, basically. And they organised a march of 20,000 people from New Cross to Hyde Park. Incredible, 17-mile walk, of 20,000 people. The police confronted it, I think, at Blackfriars Bridge very stupidly. They should have kept out and minded their own business. So they provoked a confrontation there, and it was deliberately done. It was them. Nevertheless, they got to Hyde Park, and it was the greatest show of solidarity of black people for a very long time, and it was really well done. Linton Kwesi Johnson is a very famous dub poet. Dub, I think, is a variety of reggae, if I've got it right, and he would recite his poems with a background of reggae music or dub music. His poems are also very readable as well, because they're in the Jamaican dialect, or I don't know what you call it, patois dialect, but it's still very readable, as well as really good to listen to. And he did one very good one about Sonny's letter, about a letter from a son to his mother, and it's about how he's tried to do his best to be who he is and whatever, but he's always come up against the police and he whatever, and it's not, and he's always getting arrested and whatever. And then he did a very good one called the Great Insurrection, which is about the 1981 uprising. So I recommend, if you can, read some of his poems and listen to his dub poetry. Farouk Dondi, he became a commissioner for Channel 4. I think he was a playwright, but he also did something jointly with, I think it was, yes, he arranged with Darcus Howe and Tariq Ali. Tariq Ali is a revolutionary socialist, called the Bandung File, which I think was more about politics, about South Asian politics, and other things as well. Olive Morris, where'd you start with Olive? She did all kinds of things. Feminist, but she opened the first ever black women's place on Railton Road. I think it was 65 Railton Road. She was very involved in the squatters movement, and she was always, there against racist police harassment outside the Brixton police station, demonstrating and organising all of that. Very active. Unfortunately, she died very early. She's 24. She might have been 20. She was very early. She had lymphoma or something, and she'd moved to Manchester by then and organised things there too. Olive Morris was based at what just came before the 121 Centre. I think it was called the Sabah Bookshop, Black Bookshop, which was firebombed by the National Front in 1973. I seem to remember that. There is a record of that. But even so, it obviously survived and thrived as the 121 centre. And next door at 119, that was also where the People's News Service was. That was an alternative news service. And at the back of that building upstairs was Icebreakers, which was a radical gay counselling service based on gay liberation front ethos and politics. So there's all of that. Hello. Just a bit about the Race Today Collective building and the front bit, which is the Brixton Advice Centre. They're sort of co-existent with each other. The Race Today Collective produced their own magazine called Race Today, which obviously campaigned for black rights and black liberation. And the Brixton Advice Centre, they offered free advice to people who couldn't afford to pay for a solicitor or barrister or whatever. And they advise on anything from debt to housing, immigration, a whole wealth of things that would not be available to people who could not ordinarily afford it. So it's a really good service, and it still is, but unfortunately it's a much reduced service because of cuts in funding to it. Can we go around the corner and I'll show you two more portraits? Okay, right, so, two more portraits. On our left is C.L.R. James, revolutionary socialist, Trotskyist, great writer. His claim to fame was he wrote a book called The Black Jacobins, which is about a slaves' revolt in what we now know as Haiti. Then it was known as Santo Domingo. A successful slave revolt by their black leader, Toussaint Louverture, who not only drove the French out, they drove the British and the Spanish out as well, and they took over the whole island. So it was a brilliant book about that slaves' rebellion. He also wrote a book on cricket, which you might think, oh, how nice. But it was more than, there was a sting in the tail, because although it is a very authoritative book on cricket, it also had an anti-colonialist sting in the tail as well, because when the West Indies won Britain, it was always hailed as a victory against colonialism. So there's a little a bit of anti-colonialism in that book. So it wasn't just about cricket. Okay. He went to Mexico and met Trotsky in 1939, a year before Trotsky was murdered by Stalin's assassins. Disagreed with Trotsky slightly. He travelled to the United States and he challenged the black group there because they were very separatist. They thought the only way we can get rid of discrimination against black people is to form our own nation separately. And C.L.R. James disagreed. He says, no, we have to be part of the wider working class struggle to overthrow capitalism. So that was their point of contention there. But he spent his last days here above Race Today Collective. He lived in a room there. I'm not sure. I think he died in 81, 82. 82, I think it was. Oh, 89. Well, oh, God, yes. Well, that's my blurred vision. And, of course, there's the blue plaque to commemorate him. We've already talked about Darkest How, and that wasn't there the last time we had a walk. So they've got a blue plaque up for Darkest How. Now, our Winifred Atwell. Winifred Atwell was well known for popular piano music in the 50s and 60s mostly. It's known as honky-tonk music. I used to call it plinky-plank music. But, I mean, she went very high. She was accepted by the Royal College of Music, and she was training to be a concert pianist. So she obviously aimed very, very high, and she was going to be up there with the gods on piano playing. Very popular. She had lots and lots of hits. I think it was based on ragtime. That's the kind of music that it was. First black woman to have a #1 single. But also locally, on Railton Road, she opened a hairdresser's shop. That's Winifred's claim to fame. Great honky-tonk piano player and a local hairdressing salon for black women. We also recently had a launch of a black artist. I'm sorry if you'll have to Google his name, but the people who introduced it were Linton Kwesi Johnson and Laila Hassan, who were two original members of the Race Today collective, and they were originally in the Black Panthers movement, a revolutionary black group. And they actually introduced, they talked about the Race Today, but that was, and I think Linton Kwesi Johnson is one of the directors of the 198 Centre. So I thought I'd let you know that anyway. I've already mentioned the 121 Centre when we looked at the mural, and there it is. That's where it used to be. It's now private dwellings. Next door at 119, that's where if you remember, I said was the People's News Service. Plus, in a back room upstairs was the Icebreakers Radical Gay Liberation Counselling Group. And on the day of the eviction, or near to it, there is a picture of people dancing on the balcony naked. I've got a picture of that, and it was on the mural. Yeah, I pointed out on the mural. Well, that's the actual balcony that they were dancing on. As you can see now, it's all been redeveloped into flats. So there you are, a bit of nostalgia. Next, off Railton Road, there are what we call the Poets' Roads. One's called Chaucer, Shakespeare, Spencer Road, whatever. And on Spencer and Chaucer Road, there were some huge, there were some squats there, and they were huge operation to evict them. The police would close off both sides of the street so nobody could come in. You could go out, but you couldn't come in. They'd have a crane trundling along with a ball and chain to smash through the doors, because people were squatting with barricade the doors, so they were really difficult for people to get in, to smash it in. So that's just to mention that there were one or two squats on Chaucer and Spencer Road. Across the road, there's this sort of nondescript building, but that's where the George pub used to be. That's another pub that we were thrown out of. Apparently there was a bit of a fight in there, the saloon bar type thing with chairs flying through the air and all that kind of thing. We're thrown out of there. The landlady there, Mrs. Old, she also opposed we applied to Lambeth Council for a small running grant for the gay centre. She opposed it. But originally they'd got done under the Race Relations Act for banning black people from her pub. They banned us for good. We couldn't do much about it. We did actually picket the pub, and it got in the South London press. But as ever, with no protection, there's no Gay Relations Act so that we could appeal to. So we lost that one. We incorporated Mrs. Old into one of our plays, Mr. Punch's Nuclear Family, and we called her Mrs. Mould. And the rhyme went, "My name is Mrs. Mould. I've gone so cold, I've forgotten how to smile. I managed to keep the gays out for good, but could only keep the blacks out for a while." So we incorporated her into one of our plays. I think that's probably it. And we come to where the gay centre was, which is there. Right, here we are. So over the road, that's where the gay centre used to be. On the right, where the bicycle shed is now. On the left was one of the three women's centre, the Women's Place, which among other things was the headquarters of the National Abortion Campaign. That's also been demolished. Normally I would stand inside there, but I think the residents who were going through the passageway into St George's residences behind felt a bit intimidated by crowds of people being in there. So I thought we'd better stay across the other side of the street, not to be, put them in, intimidate them by all these people they don't know, they've never seen before. In terms of the centre itself, we squatted it because we got fed up of being pushed from pillar to post by hostile landlords who threw us out of their pubs. Oh, that was a Hamilton Arms we got thrown out of. I forgot that one. And we originally met at the Minette Library, the South London Gay Liberation Front, but it was a bit inaccessible. So we moved into Brixton, into the crypt at St Matthew's Church, which is the intersect of Effra Road and Brixton Hill, but we had to leave there because of hostilities from youths who attacked us, and some of the users of the crypt, which was a community centre, didn't like us being there. So we eventually moved to the Oval House at Kennington. We used the nearby Hamilton Arms to do the discos. The Oval House was quite okay, that was quite friendly, but the customers didn't like us at the Hamilton Arms. One of them threw glasses at us, and we had a bit of a fight outside the pub, so we had to move from there. And I think it's at that point that we decided we had to squat somewhere that we can have absolute control over, that no one is going to harass us or throw us out or whatever. And at that point, someone at the South London Gay Liberation Front says, well, why don't we squat a gay centre? And by then, a couple of people from there had met people in the squatters movement. I think Mary and Derek Evans, who were involved in Shelter, one of the early housing groups for housing homeless people. And that's how they got to know the squatters group. And they realised that there's quite a lot of squats already on Railton Road. And someone found that part of 78 Railton Road had been vacated. Basically, it was a dodgy solicitor who'd done a runner. We decided, right, we'll get in there, we'll squat there. The other ones above still had people in them, not all of it. We squatted some of the places, and eventually the people in the other parts, they left as well, and we squatted those sections above the gay centre as well. So, and it was good it was extremely popular. We had discos every Friday and Saturday, which were packed. We could organise campaigns from there. We could organise making placards, banners, everything. I mentioned Andreas, who went past on his bike. Andreas organised a modern dance class, which was really good. And we incorporated some of his dances into some of Brixton Faeries' theatre productions. Besides that, it was just a place where you could go and have a coffee, sit down, have a natter, take it easy and all the rest of it. It wasn't easy to begin with, because within the first day or so we had all our windows smashed, bricks through the windows from a group of lads who came down from the youth centre. We anticipated we'd get some problems. We didn't quite realise it would be as violent as that. But we figured out that if we stick it out, it would all die down. They would realise that we're here to stay, we're not going to go away, we will always be there. And after a couple of months, it all sort of died down, and people realised that we were going to stay there. Okay. Now, St George's, there's a narrow passageway originally into St George's residences behind there. That's now the Effra Housing Association or Co-op. But I think there were 4 or 5 gay squats in there as well, and those people there use the gay centre quite frequently. A few things I forgot to mention about the gay centre, about why it was there. Part of it was to provide an alternative to the commercial gay scene, which at the time was very scarce anyway. There's hardly anything there. And what was there was usually overcrowded, overpriced, not very friendly. So that was another reason why we squatted the gay centre. And I think we were demanding our rights alongside other groups on the road, because there were already provision for youth centres, for women's centres, and we said, well, we want our place as well as a right. That was another reason why we wanted that. We wanted to try and provide a safe haven for people who just wanted to chill out, not worry about being gay, come out. They didn't have to be Martha militants. They could just be, go and have a coffee and have a sit down, have a natter. I mean, all that thing about having a safe haven, somewhere to chat, break down isolation, and also it was a launching pad for all of the campaigns and all of the theatre productions that we made. I'm going to read out some names of people: Gary de Vere, Colm Clifford, Alastair Kerr, David Callow, Jamie Hall, Michael O'Dwyer, Jim Ennis, Kevin Taylor, Steve Anders, Barry Prothero, Tim Lunn. Now, I read those out because all of those people were centrally involved in the Brixton gay community. All of them died of AIDS-related illnesses. So this walk is really dedicated to them, as is the Revolting Gays website. So I'm dedicated, just a little dedication to all those people who died and who I sincerely wish were still with us. We sort of knew the day when we were going to be evicted because there were some friendly people on Lambeth Council who told us. They were aware of it. We did have some opposition to it. When the bailiffs and police arrived to evict us, by the way, they evicted the Women's Centre on the same day, so there was lots of police around and lots of bailiffs. We did have a presence there to oppose the eviction, but we didn't try and stop it or occupy it because we'd already decided that once we were evicted, we would move in the day after. And that's precisely what we did. So they put all this brand new expensive boarding up and threw us out. We managed to get things out of the centre, like bits of furniture and whatever, just in case. But we did move in the day after, and we decided that, well, why not make a fresh start and build new furniture, new fittings, and make it a big reopening of the centre to show that we're determined not just to be evicted and to thrown out onto the street. So we had a day. Some people call it a tea dance, or if they're being pretentious, a thé dansant. Very pretentious. Basically, it was an open day where we had people come into the centre for teas and coffees and cake and whatever, just to show people who we were, what we were there for. And we had tables outside on the street, and people. There are lots of pictures of this in the Revolting Gays website of that particular event, of the reopening of the gay centre. Unfortunately, it folded probably summer of 1976, late summer, partly because of internal wrangling. Also, it was very difficult to keep it going without any sources of income, because the only sources of income we had was people putting their hands into their pockets and taking their bits of change out. We didn't have any funding. We didn't have any subscriptions or any membership or anything like that. So that plus internal differences, I think, put an end to the first ever gay community centre. But it was all worth doing because the good thing about it is the centre drew lots and lots of mostly gay men into the area, and that's how we ended up managing to squat about 10 houses further up Railton Road, back to back, Railton and Mail Road, with the garden in between. If the gay centre hadn't happened, those squats wouldn't have happened. So it had, and the fact that we were there all together, it released an astonishing amount of creativity in terms of the campaigns we did around gay news and W.H. Smith's banning gay news. All the theatre that I mentioned previously, none of that would have happened had we not squatted those places up there. I think we'll leave it there, and shall we go and have a look at the garden? I mean, the squats were from that house there up to where 159 Railton Road, all the way down. Originally, these were all squatted, all gay squats. And there are parallel squats on the other side on Mail Road, probably about 4 or 5, with a shared garden in between. Originally it wasn't shared, it was blocked off, but I'll tell you more about the garden later when we go in there, and I'll explain it. They started squatting them in 1974, and I think by the early 80s we probably had about between 8 or 10 houses altogether were squatted. And then eventually they were taken over by Brixton Housing Cooperative, and they formed a gay section of the housing co-op so that everybody could stay together in those flats. They were redeveloped into single person flats. Some people thought that was good because at least it meant you were secure, because the thing about squats is you could be evicted any time. It wasn't very secure. But obviously, if you become part of Brixton Housing Co-op, you have proper tenancy agreements, you're more secure, and it's very democratic because the group of gay people ran their own section of the co-op. So they decided on rent levels, on maintenance, on all kinds of things to do with the flats there. So it's quite democratically run. It wasn't you weren't at the mercy of a private landlord or an uncaring local authority that didn't really give a damn about housing. So it was quite. So there were pluses about becoming part of the Brixton Housing Co-op. The minus was you lost part of that spirit of communal living because they were then turned into single-person flats. Whereas prior to that, when they were squatting, you were free to move in and out of each other's houses. Nobody ever bothered locking back doors or whatever, and you could visit. You could visit them any time. But single-person flats killed part of that kind of communal spirit. So the pluses and minuses to being part of the housing co-op. Just a word about Thomas, who's going to let us in. Thomas actually staged the first ever LGBT plus film festival in 1981. That's it. Should we knock on his door? Say hello. Hi, Thomas. Oh, Thomas, thank you very much.
My claim to fame.
Yeah.
All right. In my young years, one of the squatters here and myself, we were involved in the first gay film festival at the London Filmmakers Co-op in 1981. And that's kind of been forgotten because a lot of people didn't realise it happened, but it was that. And I also, in 1983, I was one of the people who got funding from the GLC for a London-wide gay arts festival called September in the Pink, which had quite a lot of consequences. One of the people involved in the writers' group, for instance, was Janet Winterson. She was one of the coordinating members. And the music group, one of the results there was the production of demo tapes for Bronski Beat, which later became separated. So, but Jimmy Somerville, for instance, they got their break through that festival. So,
when they were rebuilding these places with Solon Housing Association, you could actually design your own flat. You could design where you wanted the kitchen, where you wanted the bedroom, where you wanted the place to sit, and you'd actually speak to the architect, and they would actually, do it to whatever you wanted. That's quite, it's quite a. Usually, you get the architect saying, "Right, that's what you get, whether you like it or not. That we've done it for you." But this was quite democratic, so they actually did say, "How do you want it?" And the whole lot was completely redesigned. And as I say, it was then single-person flats, which I think, as I say, there are pluses and minuses to that. But the garden originally, as you can see, it's just one great, enormous garden. Originally, it was split into separate households where they had brick walls, so that there would be tiny little plots of land with each connected to each house. And over the years, I think probably over 10 years or something, all of the separating walls, they're all demolished, all knocked down to make it into one communal garden. So anyone could use the garden, cultivate it, look at it, sit in it, do what you like. But it took an awful lot of work to get all of this together, planting trees and shrubs and flowers and whatever. And as you can see, it's a beautiful place to sit, really.
More to this garden then. I was a squatter here in 79 and 80 and 81, and after the riots, the council gave us a council flat for a while this was being redeveloped, and then I moved back into the same house that I was squatting before. I'm just about the only one left now. of that original group. So, yes, the garden here, many keen gardeners, as you can see, because it's completely been transformed. But over there used to be a lawn for a while. And we used to get complaints from the neighbours because one of our members, Malcolm, used to sunbathe in the nude.
Oh, yeah.
So that was one. There were complaints, or there was some campaign started by some of the neighbours here, trying to get us evicted because it was a gay community and they didn't really want that around here. But that never came to anything. And one of the people who was part of that group later was a member in the nightclub that I run, which is a gay nightclub, and came out as gay.
No.
So this tells you some of the stories that happen around here. Now, most of the people around here have moved in later. The nature of the whole thing has changed. So we're just housing gay people now. That's about it.
Here we are on Leeson Road. Now, at the end of Leeson Road, just here, it's now been redeveloped into a housing estate. But that's where the Windsor Castle Pub was, another pub that we were thrown out of. I'm not quite sure. I think the landlady originally was okay, but I think she got a bit worried about how Martha militant we were being with our, coming out as gay and frightening all the customers. And I think that's probably, she was worried about her pub just becoming an annex to the gay centre. So we got turfed out of there. I forgot to mention, of course, the Windsor Castle and the George pub that I mentioned earlier. Both of them were burned down during the 1981 uprising, and no one was really sorry to see them go. Okay, number 90 Railton Road. Here we are at the offices of the Brixton Housing Cooperative. I think this was kicked off in probably 1973, 74, round about then. And Mary and Derek Evans were involved in it, and they got to know some of the people from the gay community in Brixton, and I think they were chiefly responsible for getting people engaged in the idea of squatting. And eventually, of course, the gay community became a gay section of the Brixton Housing Co-op. So I thought I'd just mention that in passing, okay. They're very democratically run. In those days, they had the Housing Corporation, which was set up specifically to encourage social housing. And then they had subgroups like Solon Housing Association, and then more local groups like Brixton Housing Co-op. But they're all definitely set up for social housing at social rents. That, of course, is all gone now. So I thought I'd definitely mention Brixton Housing Co-op. Okay, this mural was... it's called the Nuclear Dawn. It was painted in 1981. There is a blue plaque there which gives you information about the artist. But 1981 was the year that Margaret Thatcher agreed with Ronald Reagan to site cruise nuclear missiles at Greenham Common. This occasioned massive demonstrations by women. And it was exclusively women who demonstrated at Greenham Common to try and get rid of the nuclear missiles that had been sited there as agreed with by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. It depicts basically the Cold War between America and the Soviet Union. And you can see the two battling it out in the picture. In the background, of course, is a nuclear explosion and the figure of death striding over London. One thing you might miss if you don't look carefully is in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a bunker in the House of Commons where Margaret Thatcher is sheltering with Ronald Reagan to avoid the nuclear explosion that they have actually helped to foster in the first place. And so I think, and of course the Dove of Peace is trying to separate the two warring factions between, the United States and the USSR. So I think it's just a great protest against nuclear war, basically, and the consequences of the arms race between the big powers that was going on at the time. They tried to outbid each other on who had the most nuclear weapons. The stupid thing is, if you've got hundreds of nuclear weapons, you only need one or two to destroy the whole world, because the radiation would travel across the world and kill everybody. So that's it, basically. Just a great protest. And of course, the Greenham Common women, at the height of their protest, there were about 30,000 women who camped outside the Greenham Common site where the cruise missiles were to try and stop them. Some of the women actually got inside and actually danced on top of the silos where the missiles were. Very brave of them, and tried and got through all the security and everything. Unfortunately, it didn't stop that, but it was a great protest, and that's really what this is all about. I mean, for years the mural really deteriorated and it fell apart. I mean, this whole space originally was a deserted, derelict car park. There was nothing there except weeds and whatever. They've developed this whole site into the Brixton house. This was repainted very recently, probably within the last 2-3 years, because one of the artists who did it in 81 was still alive, and they got him to repaint, renew the whole thing. That's why it still looks in a pristine state. So it was rescued from a state of dereliction and revitalised, repainted, and you can see the results there. The Brixton house here was originally it was the Oval House at the Kennington Oval. That was a site of alternative theatre and workshops on everything from modern dance to massage to learning how to put on a play. And the Oval House closed down and they've relocated here to Brixton House. Originally, the Oval House was set up in the 1930s by a group of concerned people from Oxford University, I think, who wanted to provide meaningful activity for people in deprived inner city areas. But by the 1960s, it became much more radical, much more left-wing, and they put lots of alternative theatre on, including Brixton Faeries, Blue Lips and Gay Sweatshop. So that's where Brixton House has come from, and it's been built in the last couple of years. Across the road we've got a Mexican-style restaurant. It used to be Railway Tavern, otherwise known as Bradys, after the proprietor, a very tall, very robustly built Irishman who you definitely wouldn't pick a fight with. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is the bar that lesbians were thrown out of, just for a change. It wasn't gay men this time, it was lesbians. We picketed the bar, and there's some very good pictures of this actually in the website, Revolting Gay's website, including the proprietor who's stood in the door wondering, what are all these people doing standing outside my pub with placards picketing? So really that's it, just that mentioning that this used to be the drinking establishment for all the people on the left as well. So you had all the people in the Socialist Workers' Party and the Labour Party, and lots of gay people, lots of lesbians, lefties, lots of squatters would all sort of use this as a kind of hub for drinking in. I'm going to make one concession to English heritage, because at least at the top they preserve this very nice Victorian clock tower. So that's my only concession to English heritage, because I do like it. It's nice, it's cute, I love it. I'm glad they didn't knock it down. Right, we're going to look at the Premier Inn over there. Originally it was a derelict shop called Joy, which is a clothing shop, and it was squatted in the 2010s. I'm not quite sure exactly when. There were lots of workshops, lots of campaigning from there. They even made sections of the squat for people to live in, so it was a living space as well. Unfortunately, it didn't last very long. It was evicted probably after only a few weeks of occupation. There are some pictures of it on the Revolting website, and I actually, they invited people in who were running various campaigns, so I spoke there as a member of the Queers Against the Cuts campaign. That was about spending cuts, public spending cuts, how it affected gay people and what we could do to fight back against that. So I did a workshop there. The House of Bragg, I think, were involved in it, which I think included Taha Hassan, who did a video of some of the people from the gay community in Brixton. So I think he was involved in that. And I'm sorry it's gone. What can I say? Right, this is our final stop in Windrush Square. If you remember, when Theresa May was Prime Minister in the Tory government, they actually brought about the hostile environment for immigrants. And a lot of people from the Windrush generation, people who arrived here in the late 40s onwards, were deported under her regime. And they relented on it, but for some people it was too late, because when they were deported, some of the people actually died before they were allowed to come back into the country. They couldn't, of course, they died. So that's part. I wanted to mention that because it was probably one of the nastiest, cruelest measures against immigrants that any government has ever done in this country, and that was under Theresa May. So I thought I'd mention that before we go on about the other things. In terms of LGBT+, the Ritzy, they actually put on films during LGBT month, and in the past they've also done exhibitions. It's the same at the Brixton Public Library. Very early on, in the early 70s, they put up exhibitions, photographic exhibitions, of some of the campaigns that we were involved in as the Brixton gay community. And they've always been very good at that right up into the present day. I just wanted to mention both of those. But the other things I want to mention, Lambeth Town Hall. Lambeth Town Hall, we had many dances there for South London Gay Liberation Front and the Gay Community Centre. They were very popular, very well attended. And that was really basically as to get people to know each other and to fundraise for all the activities and campaigns that we're involved in. Over there is St Matthew's Church. It's the crypt where we had one of the first South London Gay Liberation Front meetings and disco space. But as I said early on, we had to leave there because of hostilities from local youths, and some of the users didn't want us there. The final thing I'm going to talk about is the Gents toilets. The Gents toilets over there, that was a cottage. Right, it was very, very well attended, where men had lots of sex with other men. There was lots of graffiti on the wall, contact details if you wanted sex. It was, we actually made a play called Gents. Of course, I mentioned it early on about cottaging. It was also quite dangerous because there were police who acted as agents provocateurs who entrapped gay people, deliberately pretended to be gay in order to arrest people. And also there were people who were queer bashers who would actually rob you and whatever. But nevertheless, it's a sort of a sanctified place because it was a place of sexual liaisons. Unfortunately, Lambeth Council closed it down. So there you go, that's one less cottage. But I mention that because it is part of our history and I'm not going to shy away from it. Some people think, one thing about it, it was a good sort of challenge to more respectable gay people who thought that, you know, these cottagers and gay liberationists were giving respectable gay people a bad name. Well, of course we were. Well, of course we did. There's nothing respectable about us at all, and we had no intentions of being respectable. So I think we'll end on the cottage, and I think we'll wrap it up and we'll go and have something to eat and drink. How about that? I'm knackered. Oh, is it on?
Yeah.